My name is Bob Ganzak. Welcome to MotivationU, the podcast. Hello, my name is Bob Ganzak, and this is MotivationU, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill here at Celebration Point inside the Coach's Podcast Room. What a lovely day. A little fog driving down here this morning from Georgia, but a lovely day. Today's program is what I had intended to do this last week, to kind of wrap up the year. But instead, we had some technical difficulties on my end at the hotel I was staying at in South Florida. So we ran a best of program last week with Jose Raven. Always love when Jose's on the program. And so I kind of moved over to this week. And I'm calling this Opinions, Questions, and 2023. Got to get some business out of the way first, and that is that we have a Dale Carnegie class coming up, Skills for Success, starting February 7th here at Hotel Indigo, Celebration Point. People have already signed up. We have quite a few individuals already ready to go. So please, if you're in the greater Alachua area, even up to Lake City, come join us. It'll be an outstanding program, and we have a great group of individuals already that are signed up and look forward to working with them. It's 8 weeks, and so that'll take us to the end of March, I believe, from February 7th to like March 28th, something like that. Don't hold me on that. It's Tuesday night. Each week is 3.5 hours. So it's one night a week, 3.5 hours a night for 8 weeks. So a little over 24 hours of your life, 26 hours of your life, to make a huge impact on your year and moving forward. It's a great investment of your time and money and effort to do that. So that's Skills for Success Dale Carnegie class, coming to Gainesville, February 7th, 2023. I've only made that mistake once so far, and this is the 5th. So in 5 days, I've said 2022 once, but it's 2023. So let's talk about some of the things that, first of all, opinions, questions, and kind of looking forward to 2023. These are the types of things I love to do. I mean, I love to sit in this chair. No, I don't. I would much rather be up on a stage talking to you if I could. It's tough for me to sit in a chair like I'm not an acoustic guitar player. I like to kind of rock with the room if you follow my drift on that. But I get a lot of questions that are sent to me via Facebook, via text messages, a lot of different ways. And one of the things that I'm going to work on this year on this podcast is answering those questions, because I let them pile up and I never get to them. If you like to send a question, you can text it right into Facebook Live. Just put it right in below on Facebook, and Tammy will get the question to me. Most of the questions I get are like down the road or even before a program, or Bob, could you do a class on this? Could you do a talk on this? Would you do your podcast on this? Different things like that. And so we're going to tackle some of those today. And first, though, I want to start with opinions. You may hear opinions throughout this entire program. Yet, opinions, yeah, we all have them. And I want to share some thoughts on some things that have been going on lately. The first thing I'd like to do is talk about the football game Monday night. The Cincinnati Bengals against the Buffalo Bills. Damar Hamlin, what a tragedy. I was just reading before we went live on the air, and on the Buffalo Bills site, they said that things are starting to look a lot better. And neurologically, his lungs, so there's a lot of hope there. But I want to take a different stance on that. You see, we did have one player in the NFL die on the field at one time. It happened October 24th, 1971. And I happened to be a 16-year-old fan sitting in the stands. My friend Chuck Bean and I went to that game. My dad had season tickets, couldn't go that day. So we took the bus from where we lived, downtown Detroit, Tiger Stadium, and went to the game. And we witnessed that. And just being a fan there, 50 years ago, has always impacted something. A question will come up: has a player ever lost their life on the field? Yes. I mean, it strikes. And Monday night, I was sitting there watching my television, and you just knew something was wrong by the reaction of everybody else. And I had to rewind it a couple of times because my wife, who's a nurse, wanted to watch that. And so our thoughts and prayers go to the family, to Damar, to the league, to the teams, the players, the friends. It's been nice to see the way people have come together over this situation. Yeah, I want to take a little different stance on this. A little over 20 years ago, again, my son and I were at an event, the Daytona 500, sitting in the fourth turn, the day that Dale Earnhardt Sr. was killed in the race. That was a shock to the system. Definitely a shock to the system. Again, opinions. We drove all the way home. We were living in Ocala at the time. We drove all the way home before we learned that he had passed away. Knew it was bad, but we didn't know that he had passed away. And a lot of people talked about not racing the next week, shutting down the season. This could be the end of NASCAR. All of these things were being bandied about by people's opinions. But what did NASCAR do? They improved the sport. They went and put safer barriers, these styrofoam barriers on all the walls and the corners at the races, at the tracks that they were at. They made it mandatory. They made it mandatory for the drivers to use the Hans device. It's a head and neck restraint piece that goes around their neck and attaches to their helmets. They made that mandatory. They started work on improving the car. They brought engineers. They had brilliant people to make the sport safer. My point is, it's time we do that for football. It's time that we get people involved, engineers, not for profit, not to make $1 million with the greatest helmet. Of course, if something was made, it would be worth that. But for the safety of the players. Football is a violent sport. If you've ever had the opportunity, if you watch it only on television or maybe from high in the stands, you don't get the true feel of what it's like when you stand on the sidelines inches from these incredible athletes going at each other. It is a violent sport. And we need to use technology to make it safer in many ways, more than just what happened Monday. My wife and I were watching the Jaguars game last weekend. We have season tickets to the game, and we're looking forward to going Saturday night. But two things we talked about that day. One was how some of the players use such tiny shoulder pads. Doesn't even look like they got shoulder pads on. And people playing the same position have much larger shoulder pads. We need to look at all aspects of, is there a flak jacket that can be made to protect the torso from shots like Mr. Hamlin took on Monday night? We can do better. We can do better. We really can. And utilize this tragedy for something moving forward to make the sport safer. The other part of the game the other day we were watching was when one of the Jaguars players, Dwayne Smoot, just pushed into another player and went right to the ground. And I said to my wife, I think he just ruptured his Achilles tendon, which he did. He tore his Achilles. So many of those happen nowadays. We are building these bodies, and so certain parts of our bodies are points where it breaks. I mean, you watch old-time football. I'm saying old-time, like back in the 60s and even the 70s. I mean, the big players were 275 pounds. And they were not in the greatest of shape, all of them. Some were, but not all of them. Nowadays, you have a person like Penei Sewell with the Detroit Lions, an offensive tackle, 6'5", 325 pounds, and he can run almost as fast as the running back. And they've changed the rules in the sport. When a big offensive lineman would be running out to block, defensive backs, who are usually average, probably around 6 foot, 190, 195, 200 maybe, they would be able to dive at their legs to cut those blockers down. They can't do that anymore. So now all of a sudden, you're out there at 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot, 175, 195, and coming at you is a 6 foot 6 inch, 325, 330 pound offensive lineman that can run as fast as you. There's certain things we need to make sure that the fields are the best fields that we can play on. Are we getting more injuries from certain types of synthetic turfs? I've seen a lot more Achilles injuries lately. Or you see these non-contact knee injuries, ACL tears, where somebody's just running and turns. Can we find the technology to help in this way? That's my opinion on that. Again, it's just an opinion. What happened Monday night was heart-wrenching. Still is. I mean, we go online and we check to see how the young man is. Can we use this as an opportunity? Leadership, this program is about leadership. Can somebody take leadership to start looking at making the sport safer? Not changing is there things that we can do to make the sport safer? Can technology help us? Can technology help us? Second opinion. We have a lot of people. I never knew that there was that many people that bullied other people until Twitter. It's amazing to me. It's amazing. I mean, it's downright disgusting. And there's a lot of individuals that go on there and say just sensational things. You know, they've got names. I'm not talking about just normal people on the street like you or I. I'm talking about people that get paid as journalists or used to get paid as journalists. And they try to, justify it. And I'm like amazed at that. Amazed. Bullying is no good anywhere. Really isn't. The other day I asked a simple question. And I was called an idiot, told I was insecure. People that I know just writing, saying awful things. It's amazing to me that we tolerate that. You know, if people have opinions and there's no facts there, take it as their opinion. But when you start attacking other people, that's where it changes. That's no longer an opinion. That's cyberbullying. I see it go on all the time. 2023. Do you think we could make a change in that and somehow take responsibility for ourselves? I know. People tell me, hey, Bob, that's just the way our people out there. Don't read it. Don't do this. Don't. But some of us tolerate it and don't call people out on it. And they're close to us. They're friends. Maybe you can just say to them, hey, is there another way you could word that? I just think, I just speak my mind. I just tell it like it is. Okay. And their favorite line is, well, then don't follow me. Okay. Does that still justify being that way? I don't know. Again, just an opinion. Just an opinion. Not trying to change anybody's thought on that. It's just that there's got to be some decency in this world. I mean, we fight over politics. You see that all the time. I try not to get into any political debates with anybody. I've just found that that's safer for me to stay out of that. But I read them, and I read how these people write to each other, and I read, extremely well-known individuals who throw their opinions out there, and I'm like, really? I guess when you reach, I don't think they would have done that as much, attacking other humans verbally and calling them names. at the beginning of their careers. Now that they've made multi-millions of dollars and they're living in their Manhattan skyline apartment or in Greenwich Village or wherever they are, yeah, I guess you don't give a darn anymore. A lot of zeros after those numbers in your bank account. So what? They don't listen to me anymore or watch my shows or whatever it is, come to my games. It's no big deal to me. I wonder if they had that same attitude when they were rising, when they were being that inclusive person of everybody has a thought and action and try to help people understand rather than just being belligerent and cutting them down. So that's the opinion part of this program. And I appreciate you letting me share those opinions with you. The next part are questions. And I've got some questions here that were sent to me. I only picked like 3 of them, maybe 2 of them. First one is, what influenced my leadership style or my leadership thoughts? And the person was very quick to write below that, not who, but what, which I found that pretty interesting. What influenced? I spent some time just thinking about that. And I came up with 3 things really did that. The first being sports. For me personally, being a young man playing sports, watching it live on television, coaching later on, sports really played a big part of it for me. The teamwork, the tough decisions that had to be made, the sacrifices, that was a real big part of leadership for me, is not only watching the guys I played with, but in observing and getting to know the other teams and the chemistries that they had. Sports was really important to me. It shaped a lot of things that I did. I played baseball for many years, and when a lot of my friends were, I was in high school and college, and a lot of my friends were hanging out at different places. I was playing in 2 leagues, one summer, 3 leagues, and playing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, usually double headers on Sunday, sometimes 2 different leagues on Saturday. I worked in the evenings. Night games, I tried to get work in during the day. So there was a lot of things that it taught me about dedication, discipline, tenacity, those type of things. So sports probably was the number one influence in my world in that way. Second was music. I'm a word type of person. I look for stories and emotions, and most of the music that I like to listen to was either one of 2 things: an escape for me or a story that was being told. I like those 2 things. And the music that I listened to when I was in high school was a lot different than the music that my friends listened to. Although we grew up in the Detroit area, Motown was a huge part of our lives, and all of us, I would say all of us, a great majority of us grew up listening to that. But after that realm, we went in different directions. I know 50 years ago today, the album Greetings from Asbury Park, which was Bruce Springsteen's first album, was released 50 years ago today. And a friend of mine bought that for me. And nobody else listened to Bruce that I knew, except for one friend who was from New Jersey, was going to school in our school. He's the one that bought me the album. But so the words and the music, then also the makeup of the groups. We used to have a lot of Lennon and McCartney, two guys in a group or two ladies in a group that were like the focal part of the group. And you saw that chemistry. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, they wrote a lot of the songs and they were kind of deemed as the leader of the group. And it was usually the person that did most of the songwriting that did that. So I really looked at that and the dynamics in the group. And later in life, when I look back on big, like I grew up in the 70s, so those power groups like Cream, 3 people, we see that in business a lot. You got 3 people in that group, and it was only natural that sometimes it was 2 against 1. Probably not always the same 2 against 1. They didn't last a long time, and they had tremendous success. Yet you wonder if that ever played that factor in there, because there was other groups of 3 that lasted a long time, like Rush, I think of. But still, those dynamics were there, so you have to be thinking of that. And it's the music makeup of those groups were really something. My 3 favorite artists were all frontmen for a band, but the band was called Them. It was Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. It was Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. Jimmy Buffett and the Coral Reefer Band. And I liked each of them for different reasons. Yet all of them have loyalty. If you study their leadership, there's people in Buffett's band that were there forever. And he had to kick one of his best friends out of the band for reasons. And then you look at Springsteen's band. Some of those guys have been with him for 50 years or more, even before they became successful. So what is it that makes them tick? And why will somebody put aside their own personal desires to go follow this person? And don't throw just money at me. There's something else. There's something else that drives that. Another thing that you notice in some of these bands is they surround themselves with people that have similar work ethics. They are as committed to the long run as the head of the band. And we see that in businesses too. People that are committed, you look, Jim Collins said in his book, Good to Great, getting the right people on the bus is really important. And then putting them in the right seats. And then understanding that you got to get better. If a band does not get better, they play that long together, they should be better today than they were, 6 years ago or 10 years ago. And that takes a commitment from them. It takes a big commitment. And that's vitally important. We're going to continue with this on the music side of it and leadership right after this break. We're coming to you live from the Coach's Podcast Room. Yeah, Coach Steve Spurrier's podcast room here at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, Celebration Point, exit 484, 384. 384. There isn't a 484 in Florida. It ends at 470. I know that. I go by it every time I drive home. exit 384 Archer Road here in Gainesville. Be right back.
We still hear it. The sound of victory. The joy of being part of something great. And while things may not be the same right now, we haven't gone anywhere. If you bleed orange and blue, then Meldon Law is the firm for you.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back to Bob Ganzak, and we're going to get right back to the music thought process and leadership, and one of those things that kind of swayed my leadership thoughts over the years. First, I do want to mention again that coming up February 7th, we have a program, Dale Carnegie Skills for Success program, coming to Gainesville, Florida. And it's going to be at Hotel Indigo, Tuesday nights from 6 to 9:30. One night a week for 8 weeks. That's it. It's intense, a lot of fun, goes through just like that. You can go to jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, and just look for Find a Class. Find the one for Gainesville. It's right there on the list. And go ahead and sign up. You can register and pay and everything right there online. And we'll send you back out an email automatically. I will be contacting you in the near future to discuss what the program will be, taking place at, how, and what you'll need and everything else. So that's February 7th. jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com. Go ahead and sign up for that program. So back to the music. So I was mentioning that, that there are some individuals that stay with people, leaders, for a long time. I got to know one of those people back in 2003, 2004. Backstage at a Bruce Springsteen show, met Steven Van Zandt, Little Steven, Silvio from the Sopranos, and he and I hit it off. He took my business card. I was on my way heading back to Florida from North Carolina, and I get a phone call. Like, wow. And he's like, hey, we've got a show in Denver next week. Are you going to come to that? I said, I can't go to Denver. And but he did talk me into going up to Detroit, my hometown, so I went to Detroit. And then he actually flew me up to New York for the last weekend of that tour, put me at a real nice hotel in Greenwich Village, spent a lot of time, had a couple of meals. I had so much work going on back at the radio stations that I couldn't stay any longer, but he wanted me to come over to Jersey for Monday and Tuesday. They were filming another scene of The Sopranos, and he wanted me to be there and watch that. But we got a lot of time to talk. And this isn't about, hey, cool, Bob met somebody that was really famous, big deal. It's not about that. I wanted to give you some context that I was able to ask him some questions. And some of the things that he told me about his boss, the boss, Springsteen, was that he's consistent. He was trustworthy. He was purpose-driven. He had a vision. Think of those things. You're running a corporation when you run a band like that. And you need the cooperation of the people around you. And it takes a lot of people to put that program together. And that person whose name is out front and has to walk up to that microphone 250, 260 times a year in their youth and put his voice and his words on display in front of people, it takes some courage. It takes some courage. It takes leadership. And one of the things Stephen said to me was, even if I was working in one of my own projects and Bruce called me and said, hey, let's hit the road, he said, I would drop that. We all would. And go to him. They were not happy in the 1980s, late 1980s, 1990, when Bruce disbanded the band. They were not happy. Yet, he also told me that, and I won't say the amount, but he wrote a check to everybody in the band that made it real nice. That made it real nice. And then a number of years later, they did get back together. But there are certain qualities about leadership that we can take from that I took from that. When I study some of my favorite bands and why do some burn out? Why do some companies burn out? Why do some leaders flame out? Why do some artists not keep going? I think of a band that had like a huge first album back in the mid 90s, Hootie and the Blowfish. Second album, crash and burn. What was it? What was the leadership? What was the dynamics to that? Was it luck? No, I don't think so. It was talent. I'd love to sit down with Darius Rucker sometime and pick his brain about that. It would be like amazing to me. I think of Kenny Block here in Gainesville. I remember when we had Wind FM in Ocala and we weren't on the air yet in Gainesville back in 95. Sister Hazel used to come in and play all the time live on the air with us. And, and it was the drive of those guys, their vision, their belief in themselves, that you knew they were going to make it. It made them different than the other. Other guys may have played the guitar better. I mean, Jimmy Buffett is a great example of that. He's not the greatest musician, not the greatest singer. He does write some pretty cool songs, but there's storytelling. It's an escape. He found a niche. He was trying to make it as a country artist, wasn't working. So he left Nashville, headed for Key West, and the rest became history. How many businesses try to do the same thing over and over and over again and fail and fail and fail and never make adjustments? That's what you learn from people. That's when you study the successful individuals. I love music, so I like to study those things. And I try to find out why some of the bands that I liked when I was younger never made it. You know, they had a one-hit wonder, and they never produced or recorded another song. Some of them didn't have that vision that they could do it over again. You have to remember, back in the 60s and 70s, being a rock musician wasn't that lucrative in the early. It was something you did until you turned 30 or maybe 25. You know, they didn't see it as a long-term. Not all of them. Some of them did. So that's what we can learn in business from that. We can learn about leadership from those individuals that have the vision, have the stick-to-itiveness, the belief in themselves, the creativity, find themselves a good group of people to work with that they can get along with over a long period of time, and that they have similar visions and similar dedication to their craft. You go to Northrop Grumman in St. Augustine, and you talk to any of those engineers there, they are committed to that plane, the E-2D. They love it. They are passionate that they get to work on it. There are men and women that work in engineering on all facets of that build. And they are an incredible team. And they work together. And it is fun to see. So that's what I kind of got from music. And the third thing was the businesses that I worked in. I learned a lot from my first boss. My first boss was my dad. I had to work summers. Some days my dad owned a print shop. But I got to watch the dynamic between my dad and his brother. They were co-owners in the business. My dad was the person that oversaw the production and sales, and my uncle ran the back end, the accounting and the billing. And they worked real well together for many, many, many years and did really well together. But there was sometimes some friction there. You know, my dad was alpha male. He was a tough dude. You know, I will tell you. Popeye forearms, you know, great athlete. And my Uncle Bill was more, you know, he wasn't, I don't want to say he was clumsy. Maybe he was a little clumsy. But awesome man. But they learned how to work their skills together. But when my dad retired and left the business, it disappeared because they never replaced that charisma that my dad had with clients to make things happen. So that was a big influence on me. Another one was a gentleman by the name of Sherm Becker. When I was in college, I worked for a shoe store. It was a sporting goods shoe store. It was called The Locker Room, not associated with what we know the locker room to be nowadays. But Sherm Becker was a master merchandiser. I mean, he taught me so much, just how to approach people. Like when people would walk into our store, the first thing people usually, can I help you with anything? No. He taught us how to let the people come into the store and then compliment them on something that you noticed, or ask them a question that does not have to do with, can I help you with something? And there was just, it was the interaction with people. Now that was just a small store of Mr. Becker's. He had a shoe store called Rosin Sherm's that was huge outside of Detroit, and that was his bread and butter. But just wonderful man. The way he treated people was just absolutely golden. It didn't matter who they were. It was always with a smile on his face, a firm handshake, a positive note, enthusiasm, very much, very much. Then I got into other companies and businesses. I did get into radio down the road. And my first boss in radio, the first general manager at my first paid radio station, was a gentleman by the name of Chuck Mefford. Attention to detail, quality, know your path, know where you want to go and how you're going to get there. Now, again, this is 1980s radio, so things were a little different then. Yet, his vision was incredible, and his attention to detail was impeccable. And when he put his voice onto a commercial or a talk show that we used to run daily, I mean, it was perfect. It was perfect. My general sales manager back then, a gentleman by the name of Bill Pacelli, both Chuck and Bill have passed away over the last 15 years. Bill was the quintessential salesman, but he had the knack of being able to teach other people how to do it. Not all sales managers can sell and teach. Bill was incredible. And back then we didn't have these fancy proposals and iPads, and it was more of who you were and one sheets that you would pull out, but learning how to communicate and having those tough conversations with clients. That was a big part of that I learned early in my career in that realm. And then probably working in Dale Carnegie, not only just the leadership things that we teach, but the way we treat people, the way our company, it's amazing to me. I get the chills every time I talk about this. I mean, I'm getting that right now. I wish I was, with a group of thousands of people sharing these thoughts with you, because I just got that chill run through me, the positive kind. When you go to one of our conventions, it is amazing. The energy in the room and the enthusiasm, and not a single bit of it is manufactured. There's nothing in there that is a put on. This is the way that we live our lives through practicing Mr. Carnegie's principles. And who better to practice those principles than the franchisees and the employees and the CEO of Joe Hart, Jean-Louis, Ursel Charles, the head of all of our instructors. You as a leader, we as budding leaders can make changes in our world just by putting a smile on your face and walking in with some enthusiasm. I'm going to share an email I got last Tuesday. I won't mention the person's name, but this is a text, and I'll read to you what they wrote to me and then how I wrote back, and I'll tell you why I did that. Bob, Happy New Year. I've never written to you for advice. Here's something I'm really conflicted about. I've worked for a company for 4 years, and I'm excited that I will finally get a performance review, especially that there's a possibility that I get a good raise. However, this was received in an email from our regional director regarding percentages and scores. She copied the email and sent it to me. It's proprietary, so I'm not going to mention what is in there. But it kind of gave her a bad thought in her mind. And she said, help me with the words of wisdom when you can, and thanks for listening. So here's her question. They are telling people that she perceived this, unless you score perfect on your grade sheet, you're not going to get a raise. And then they went on to say, nobody scores perfect, because we don't want to have people around that have nothing to learn. So, and it was copied and pasted. So I'm like, okay. So this is what I said to her. Happy New Year. As for your challenge, don't put things in your mind that don't belong there. You jump to a couple of conclusions. Bridges you do not have to cross until you get there. She has no clue what they're going to say to her in this meeting. And she's building all this anxiety based upon what's going on up here. The gerbils are running real fast. And they're making that wheel spin and spin and spin and spin and spin. And all of a sudden, she jumps to a conclusion. And then I wrote, and if you get there, you will cross them because of who you are, not because of what you know. I asked, do you deserve a raise? Why? If those answers are good enough for you, then they're good enough to share them with your higher-ups that make those decisions. Just remember your principles, your Dale Carnegie, she's a Dale Carnegie graduate. Just remember your Dale Carnegie principles when you go in. First of all, be genuinely interested in them. Smile. Use their name. Listen. Encourage them to talk. You want to get information from them. Make them feel important, but do it sincerely. No flattery here. If you make a mistake in anything that you say, admit it quickly and emphatically and move on. Let them do a great deal of the talking. When you're listening, you get to learn. See things from their point of view too. Try to really understand where they're coming from. Don't be afraid to give them a fine reputation to live up to. And don't be afraid to throw down a challenge. Ask them questions instead of telling them information. Ask questions. Bring things out from them. Gave her a couple of questions. Are you pleased with the work I've done in the past year? What makes you proud of my department? Any questions like that along those lines. Instead of telling them your opinion on what you've done, or get the feedback. You want to know what they're thinking about you. And you initiate that. And I told her that should get you going. Trust your instincts. You're a good person. And let them see that. Again, living in those principles. So that's kind of the way I deal with things. When I coach people, it's more of a logical way. My style isn't for everybody. And maybe my storytelling or keynote speeches aren't for everybody. Yet the people that I work with and connect with, they tend to enjoy them. So let me move on to 2023. We've talked about some opinions. Well, I could talk for 4 hours about opinions. Talked about what kind of my leadership influence was, not the people, but the things. And then I want to talk to you about moving forward, 2023. I'm not a big believer in New Year's resolutions. And I'll share with you a couple of reasons why in a moment. So I don't usually put those together. I try not to have this beginning of the year, let's stack up all the blocks in one area, and then 2 weeks from now we'll kick them over, forget about them, lose them, beat ourselves up over it. We'll spend February wallowing in our pity because we weren't able to live up to what we laid out in January. And I think some people's New Year's resolutions are written while they're sipping from a bottle of champagne. But, so they're not the things that you really need to look at. But my son put a quote out, and I just took the quote. I didn't take the whole page. And it sums it up to the way that I think. If you want to really succeed in 2023, just take this one line, this one quote from my son, Matt. Do what I say I'm going to do. That's it. Do what I say I'm going to do. That was really refreshing for me to read that. So push yourself in that direction. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If it's health, do it. People always come to me at this time of the year and say, how can I lose weight? It's the same thing in July that is now. 4 things matter in you gaining weight for most people. What you eat, how much you eat, when you eat it, and how you burn it off. If you're eating a ton of calories and your exercise is standing up because you lost the remote, you're probably going to have a problem. On the other hand, if you're staying away from fried foods and a lot of sugars, and you're out, walking or running or lifting weights, or being active, you probably have a better chance to do that. If your portions are good. I used to love eating grape nuts, the cereal. I shake my head. And I was always gaining weight because I'd pour a bowl of grape nuts, a big bowl. I loved them. And then a doctor at the Mayo Clinic who I was having coffee with one day said, "Did you ever read the side of those? Did you ever read to see what a serving size is?" I mean, I was probably eating 2,000 calories for breakfast a day. So, those portions are really important, and it's important to do that. So I'm going to give you 6 things that'll help you curb your ego. Don't let your ego run away. Be careful of bad friends. Friends can lead us down, some friends can lead us down the wrong path. Do you want to go into a certain area? Sometimes you got to go in your own direction. You got to create your own path. And just following the crowd can lead to trouble. Don't get caught up on people's opinions. As we said earlier, everybody's got them. Everybody's got an opinion. And if they're personal at you, move on. Usually that person that's throwing an opinion at you is trying to bring you down to their stage. You don't have to tell them that. Just understand it. Negative thoughts. It starts up here. The 6 inches between your ears. Vitally important to your success this year. Don't say I can't. Say, how can I? Figure it out. Don't get caught up in materialistic things. Stay away from addictions. Yeah. I'm not talking drugs and that. I mean, I'm talking about bad habits, that get us down the wrong road. That's it. That's it. One show. Just get the year started straight. Next week we'll have a guest. I've got a couple of people lined up, just trying to find them in the right slots where they're going to go, and we'll have some fun with that.